that it's just a comforting book. It's like having a warm hug or a blanket or a hot cup of tea. Like, hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten, and today we are doing my top books from 2022. Now I am actually filming this 2 weeks before the end of December, but this is when I've got the time to film it, so this is what we're gonna do. These are the top 12 books that when I was thinking about all the books I've read this year, these are the 12 that automatically jumped to mind. There have been so many more that I've absolutely loved. I did a quick tally up of what I've read so far. I have 20 5-star books. Now I don't really use ratings here on YouTube, but I do use them on Goodreads. To get that rating, I use Coolpile, which was created by G over at Bookrace, so I'll have her channel linked below. It's a really handy tool. It just breaks down everything about the book so you can properly analyse the characters, the atmosphere, the plot, the intrigue, all of it. And so that helps give me those 5 stars. Now I only had 20 this year. I definitely had more last year when I was using star ratings a lot more. However, I did have 63 4 stars, which broke down into 38 4.5 stars. So I have had almost 60 books that have been top tier, creme de la creme for me. And so it was really hard just to break this down to 12. So there are so many books that I would love to say, oh, honourable mention to these. I'm not. I am restraining myself to just these top 12 because these are ones I initially thought of, but there have been so many more. Let me know in the comments below what have been some of your favourite books of the year, but let's get into this lot. Starting off with a book that I'm sure you're tired of hearing about by now because it was in my favourite fantasy books video, and that is A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, and this was written by Marie Brennan. I loved this book so much. It's so amazing. Marie Brennan is an author that I found in 2022 and I love her work so much. I think it's so beautifully written, and this is probably my favourite out of the ones that I've read. I mean, granted, I've only read 2. Let's not get into that because otherwise this video is going to be very long. But I'm loving it. I'm highly invested in these. In this one we are following Lady Trent. She is writing her memoir, which means that it's so well written because we're having the timeline of Lady Trent when she's growing up, how that her father's quite lenient towards her, so even though ladies aren't meant to be interested in natural sciences, she explores it anyway. We have Lady Trent from now that's thinking about this, inserting little comments of, oh, I was so ridiculous then, and things like this. And it does sound exactly like that because the writing style of this is like a Jane Austen. It's set in that sort of time period and I love it for that. It's got that same sense of proprietary and everything in this. Obviously our main character's pushing out against those boundaries. However, it has the inclusion of dragons, which just makes it even better. So Lady Trent ends up going on this expedition to find these dragons that have been behaving very differently, and they want to know why. They also want to learn more about them for science and study them. That does mean you do get a lot of descriptions of dragons that they are analysing, dissecting, so there is quite a lot of that in it, but it's so well done and nothing ever feels info dumpy at any point. There is a lovely story that goes alongside it. I know, it just really worked for me. I'm so excited to carry on with the series. This is definitely one of my best books that I've read this year. Well, 2022. So this year for me, but last year by the time you're watching this. Moving on. We then have a book which I can say, is it the best book I've read? I don't know. But is it one that I have consistently thought about since I finished it? Yes. And that's Bunny by Mona Awad. I wasn't going to put this book on this list, but I saw it on my bookshelves and I was like, I can't not, because I have not stopped thinking about this one. This one is weird. It's a weird book. We're following our main character, Samantha, and Samantha attends this highly selective program at Warren University, and she is there for English and writing. She has a bit of a love-hate relationship with this group of girls, which she dubs as bunnies because that's what they call each other. You can tell she's desperately jealous, she desperately wants to be a part of it, but she also ridicules them, and I think that's more of like a protective thing for her to get over the fact that she was never included, until one day she is included and things get weird. It is such a weird book. There is no other word for it. It is dark academia as well, but it's weird. It references a lot of other books, which I really enjoyed when I was reading this. I was buddy reading this with my friend. She was just like, it's okay, it's weird, but I wouldn't reread it. Whereas I went, it's weird, it's fascinating, I would reread this. And like I said, I've not stopped thinking about it. I found it so intriguing. I really did enjoy this, and I think I'm going to enjoy it even even more upon reread. This was the second time of me trying to read it. I attempted to read it in 2019 or 2020 I believe. I didn't get that far into it before I DNF'd because I was like, this is too weird for me. But then I tried again and I'm so pleased I did. I think it was such an interesting book, but it's weird, and I've said that word a lot, but that is what this book is. It's definitely a Marmite book. You're either going to really like it or you're really not going to, but I liked it. A book that I think is incredibly underrated is The Madwoman's Ball by Victoria Mars. This was translated from French by Frank Wynne, and I loved this book. I thought it was fascinating. We're following a few different perspectives of women that are all in this asylum, and you have the different perspective of some women loving the fact that they're there because they're protected from society, from men and the way they are. Some people who are railing against the fact that they're there. They've been put there just because they've been seen as too much hassle. Oh, she's not conforming to how I expect her to behave, and so that's where she was put. You also follow someone who works there who very much believes in what this psychiatrist is doing, even though it's horrendous. So interesting getting a snippet of these women's lives. Now, it is very small, but it's so incredibly powerful. It's also based on real events that happened. So there was something called a Madwoman's Ball in France at this asylum where it's all based, and it was where the creme of society got to interact with these women and feel like, oh, look at us, we're kind of taken part in all of this. And it's not fair because those women, some of them who really needed help, were then put on display for the amusement of others, which I don't appreciate, but it also raised money for it. So this, your swings and roundabouts, but I think this was incredible reading. It was so good, and I loved the points they argued in this. Some of these tales of the women are just so heartbreaking. Now, it's not a short story collection, it flows all together. You just get the snippets from different women, the different things that they've had to face. It's fantastic, and I really don't see enough people talking about it. Going back to Dark Academia, we have my favourite book. Honestly, this was one that I easily thought of, like, yes, this one, Natural History of Dragons, and a couple of the other ones that are going to come up were like literally the top 5 that I automatically thought of. I was like, yes, no question, absolutely loved them. And this one, If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, is a Dark Academia book, and I loved it. We are following Oliver. Oliver is Shakespeare obsessed. He went to a university that was Shakespeare obsessed. As a result, it was kind of like a cult that he ended up a part of because they are entrenched with Shakespeare. They're allowed to think of nothing else for the years while they're doing this university course. It is highly selective, and they are all actors, and I think it's fantastic. Some people don't like it because you do get a lot of Shakespeare language used in this book. They quote lines to each other to reference how they're actually feeling outside of their lessons as well as inside of it. I loved it for that because it felt so real, and this cult-like aspect on how much that they entrenched themselves into Shakespeare, that anything outside of it didn't exist for them. This was their bubble. Now, we know at the very start of this book that someone from his group, so Oliver is a part of this group, his year, there's only, I think there's 5 of them, and they're the ones that are in their last year. They are really close knit. They've dealt with so many different things, but you know, one of them from this group has passed away, and Oliver is telling his story to a police officer because Oliver took the fall for what happened. It's an unreliable narrator because obviously you're seeing it all from Oliver's perspective. I loved this. I actually tabbed it, which is probably the only book that I've tabbed this year. I was enjoying it so much. I had different tabs for the mystery part of it, trying to solve what happened and who did it. I did get that completely right. It wasn't exactly hard, but I didn't care either because it was about the process, about the fact that what desperation drove them to this, that I really enjoyed. So I know, again, there's been a couple of complaints that it wasn't like, oh my god, that was such a surprise in it, but I don't think that was the point of it. Then you've got quotes that I just loved in this, and then a romance in this, which I adored. I have loads of lines that have been underlined. I've got folded pages for things that I love. Okay, I'm just going to flick to one quote that I loved. What liars they are, the sky and the water, still and calm and clear, like everything was fine. It wasn't fine. And really, it never would be again. Just things like that. It's like such beautiful writing. So yeah, I loved this. Cannot wait to reread this. I'm really tempted to get the collector's edition of this, but I don't need to because I won't read. It's a whole thing. But I loved it. Highly recommend it. Really enjoyed it. Then a classic book. I read quite a few different classics. This one is one that kind of surprised me on how much I really enjoyed it compared to the others, and that's Tess of the D'Urvilles by Thomas Hardy. I had been putting off picking up Thomas Hardy books for a while. I didn't know why, I just didn't think I was going to like them, just had that prejudice in my mind. But this was really good. So we're following Tess. Her life is not good. Like, Thomas Hardy's books are quite morbid and depressing. I think it did a really good job of commenting on social conventions at the time and the prejudices they had towards women, and there are so many comments that Thomas Hardy makes about how ridiculous it is, how women are expected to be this way, which goes against nature, which doesn't make any sense because of how contradictory it is to one another. It's really good. I really enjoyed it. Pair that with the beautiful depictions of English countryside and I was in love. I fell in love with this book. Really want to read more of his writing. Really surprised myself with this one, but I enjoyed it. We then have a bit of Greek mythology retelling, and that's Cassandra by Christa Wolf, and this one is German. It was translated by Jan van Hurik. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I've read quite a few Greek myth retellings this year. I had a period in time this year where I was so entrenched in it. I was reading so many of them, and I was looking at all the ones that I'd read, just seeing which ones, okay, if I had to choose one, what would it be? And surprisingly, it would actually be Cassandra, because this is one I've kept thinking about. I've read some of the others like Electra by Jennifer Saint, which I absolutely loved. I've read Helen of Troy. I've read quite a few. This one just stood out to me. It surprised me. So in this one we are following Cassandra, and Cassandra is the sister to Paris from everything that happened with the Battle of Troy. She is someone that was gifted visions of the future. However, she was cursed automatically because she refused Apollo's advances. For daring to refuse him, he cursed her with these visions. Now, some versions of the story say that he did actually force himself on her and then still cursed her. There's a few different ways. In this one, I really liked how it was all depicted, how Cassandra was seen as someone that was crazy and mentally not there. Like, the narrative in that is a little bit broken. You get snippets where part of it's from the past, part of it is from what happened in Troy, part of it's present day, because we're seeing all of this when she is on her way with Agamemnon, who claimed her from the spoils of war, and she's travelling back and she knows what's going to happen to him. It is a stream of consciousness. There is no chapters in this. It does flow kind of with the timeline and that, but I just think the way it was written was exceptional. I found it brilliant and a really interesting look into someone that does get overlooked a lot within mythology. Obviously, I think especially in the last couple of years, there's been a massive resurgence of giving these women voices, which I'm loving and will continue to explore in 2023. But this was definitely one that really stuck with me. Plus, I mean, the cover. It's fantastic. I think this wins it for like the best cover of the year. I love this cover so much. Another classic that I read is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides, and this I really enjoyed. This was so interesting. So we are following this, we're being told this story by this group of boys who, when they were younger, were obsessed with these girls. These girls were not allowed to interact with boys. They were kept very secluded. They weren't allowed to wear certain things. Their mother was quite a fanatic like that and enforced these really strict rules on these girls. I can't remember what I was saying. We had to quickly stop. I think it's about the decline of these girls, because what happens is we have 5 sisters and they start committing suicides. Nobody seems to know why. Nobody wants to explore that except for these boys who were obsessed with these girls, and it's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was amazing. I think even just the little tagline on the back does a good job of summing up why I was so intrigued and then what just gripped me, because we're seeing this all from the boys' perspective. These girls seem so detached, like they don't seem real because they idolize them so much. They don't seem like real girls. As a result, we never really get to know them, and I think it was just done really well. But the tagline is, "That girl didn't want to die. She just wanted out of that house. She wanted out of that decorating scheme. I was drawn in by the cover because I really love this cover. Yeah, this has been, again, another book that's just stayed with me that I do think about and I thought was expertly written. Last 5. We have the Massive Tome, that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and this was by Susanna Clarke. This was the first book I thought of. When I think of the best book that I read in 2022, this is the book that comes to mind, which is amazing because I read this in January and it has stayed with me throughout the year. It's been such a good book and all I want to do is reread it. I think it's the perfect book for winter actually. It's so freaking good. I loved it. So we are following 2 different characters. We have Jonathan Strange, who is this young person who has never been good at anything until he discovers that actually he could be a magician. He could be a fantastic magician. He then finds Mr. Norrell, who is one of the last magicians, and he's very much like protective, doesn't want to explore the magic in it, doesn't want it to be used for anything. He's like, knowledge should be protected, not shared. But Jonathan Strange managed to needle his way in enough that Mr. Norrell does start teaching him. Now, I will be honest, there are points in this book which are incredibly dull, but that is because we're seeing them from the perspective of Mr. Norrell, and Mr. Norrell is a dull character. And that's something I loved about this book, that the parts where we're following Jonathan Strange are a bit more chaotic, feel a bit brighter, and have so much more going on, so much more emotion, whereas Mr. Norrell is dry and dull and it works for who he is. So yes, it was tough to get through at times because of that, but it worked so well because it ingrained who he actually is. Alongside all of this, we do get a perspective from, I think it's the Raven King, that ties in the magic to all of this. So this is set at a time where I think it's the Napoleonic Wars, so it is a historical fantasy book, and alongside you get the English folklore side of things, which is where the Raven King steps in, and also all the magic and stuff, and it's fascinating. You get footnotes in this book as well, and those footnotes could be a sentence, it could be a paragraph, it could be a couple of pages where it's a story within this story. It just works because it ties in everything together, and I loved this book. It's so fantastic. Don't get me wrong, I was intimidated by the size of it. This book is over 1,000 pages, 1,006 pages long, but I think it's fantastic. I love the character development we get in this. I love the exploration of magic, how folklore is tied in with this book alongside the historical setting. I think it worked fantastically well. I really want to reread this and annotate it. We do also get illustrations in this as well, which I loved. I was reading this before I fell into my annotating era, loving that. It's so good. I think annotating a book really just does a whole new level. Sometimes my annotations will literally be a couple of sentences underlined throughout the whole book and that's it. Sometimes in the cases of like, the Virgin Suicides, I have pages that have been folded because I really loved those quotes. Like I say, with If We Were Villains, I do have some pages that are tabbed. It's more unlikely that I will tab. I forget about them, to be quite honest. I'm more likely just to fold a page, but I will underline things. I will write little notations in the margin. That's also less likely. I love it, and I definitely think that I want to do that with this book. So I do want to tackle this soon, actually. I'm debating whether I do it in like February or whether I save it for the end of the year. I don't know, but I love this. This was so good, and like I say, winter is the perfect time to read this book, in my opinion. Then we have a murder mystery. Now, murder mysteries this year I have discovered I absolutely loved, and this is where I really wanted to do a honourable mention. But you know what, let's do it, because it's also the year that I discovered the cozy murder mystery genre, and it was all sparked off with The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, and this year I read the whole trilogy. So I started off reading this one. It's been so good. I love these books so much. They are definitely an honourable mention to this list because it sparked off the realisation that I love cozy murder mysteries, and Agatha Christie is a big part of that, and I have started my Agatha Christie journey. So I started off with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's books, the Sherlock Holmes books, last year, and finished that off this year, and now I'm going to be starting Agatha Christie. I read The Murder at the Vicarage earlier this month, so in December, and I loved it so much. I had so much fun with this. I underlined so many parts in it. I wish I'd tabbed it because then I could have kept track of all the different suspects I had and the clues pertaining to them. I do have a whole separate video, so I'll have that linked below for you if you're interested. It was so much fun, and again just cements the fact that I do love a murder mystery. It's something that I I automatically go to and will make me happy, guaranteed. It's so much fun. And the cozy ones, you know what, they may not be thrilling, they may be a bit ridiculous at times, but I love them. Yes, this had to be in here, but like I say, it is tied with Richard Osman's book because this was the book that cemented the fact that I love this genre of books. Which, continuing on with that, we have The Agathas by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson. I loved this book. This is a YA murder mystery. I don't know, there's just something about it. Cozy murder mysteries are fantastic and I will read them regardless of age range. I think they are so good. Like, there's even a few middle grade ones that I want to try because I love them. They are my go-to comfort books now and I think they're great. This one is the first book where I tried to solve it, where I actually made a whole mind map and everything, and it was the first time I really indulged in that and had so much fun with it. As a result, this is a book that I would recommend every single time. If you want a fun murder mystery, this is the book. Again, it's a bit ridiculous, it's a bit outlandish. Did I solve it? Yes. Did I solve this one? No. But it was just great. It's so much fun, and that is what I go to these murder mysteries for, is just the fun time of it. This one we're following Alice. Alice is obsessed with Agatha Christie, which I love, and she was this really popular girl. However, she had a bit of a falling out and now her best friend has turned up dead, and she kind of uses Iris, who is meant to be tutoring her, as a way to help solve this case and what's going on, because she's like, the police are doing nothing and so they are going to solve it themselves. And so Alice, with the help of Iris, do investigate this murder. It's so good. We also have a lot more in depth with Iris. She has quite a difficult home life and she's got a lot of things to deal with there, so I think this book handles a couple of different topics very well. But I really enjoyed it, and like I say, if you need a fun book, this is the one. I wasn't including rereads in this list, and this one technically isn't a reread, and that is the uncensored version of Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, I've read The Picture of Dorian Gray and I liked it. I thought it was a good book, but this is the uncensored version, which is why I say technically it's not a reread, because I haven't read the uncensored version, and oh my god, did I love it. I loved it so much more than the original, and I know it's only a few little things that were taken out, but it made the biggest impact on me and I loved it. So we are following Dorian Gray. He is someone that is beautiful, and he makes this deal that if he could stay young forever, that he would do anything for it. And so his portrait ages, and you see all the sins that Dorian is able to commit without having any repercussions all play out on his portrait. It is a love story, it is a tale of obsession, and it's dark. It's basically like seen as the godfather of dark academia as well. I think it's fantastic. I really enjoyed this and would highly recommend, if you've read Dorian Gray and you enjoy it, then you should be reading this one, because it's so good and it just gives you that extra insight. It's not something I've ever seen many people talk about. It was actually a book I found because of TikTok. It's not widely published. I picked this one up from Queer Lit UK, and I do think potentially W.H. Smith's does it as well. So there is a couple of places, but places like Waterstones and that, they don't sell this book. And I think that's a shame, because this was so well done. It's only available in this edition as well, which I wish it wasn't shiny, but that's me being fussy. I think if I was to reread Dorian Gray, I would just reread this one. I read this in a 24-hour readathon and it was the best book I read then. I adored it so much I did not want to put it down, and this is one that I will always continue to think of. Like, it's actually the uncensored version. It's probably my favourite classic book now, which says a lot because Jane Eyre has been sitting in that top spot for years and years, but this one, I think it beat it. I genuinely think it beat it, but the uncensored version. And then the very last book, no one should be that surprised at, because again, I read it recently and I fell in love with it. And that is, of course, Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This was fantastic. I loved this book so much. This is a book that I wasn't going to pick up. I have seen it everywhere, BookTok, BookTube, you name it, it's been there. And oh my god, I'm so pleased I read it. It's so perfect. So this is a cozy fantasy. It's a low stakes story. We're following Viv, who is an orc. She's given up her fighting ways. She's opened a coffee shop in a place where nobody's even heard of coffee. The depictions of coffee, the depictions of the pastries, the smells, the taste, it's so well written. Does a lot happen in this book? No, not really. Some bits, yes, to carry on with the plot line. Is it a bit obvious about what's going to happen and a bit predictable? Yes. Do I care? No, it was perfect. I loved it, and it's got me really thinking about other books that I would classify as cozy fantasy. I do think it is a genre which, again, like a cozy murder mystery, they are just books that no matter how low you're feeling, they're going to make you feel better. And it's lovely that I found that within the fantasy genre as well, and not just murder mysteries. So I do think I'm going to make a video on other books that I think are cozy fantasy books. This one, to be honest, is probably the best one that I've read, especially because this is the book that sparked me thinking about that. If you haven't read it, please do yourself a favour and give it a go. Again, don't expect the plot line to be anything like with amazing twists and turns. Just go into it knowing that it's just a comforting book. It's like having a warm hug or a blanket or a hot cup of tea, like something like that. That's the feeling that this gives me. It's just lovely and cozy, and that is all you need it to be. So those are my top 12 books of 2022. The pile is going to fall on me. I loved it. I loved all these books for lots of different reasons. As said, a couple of them because they sparked off a love of a genre which I didn't realise how much I adored. Some of them just because they're so well written. But either way, I have enjoyed all of these books, and all of these are books that I consistently think about, and that's the reason why I chose this. So last year I did this as the best book of each month, and then I did a wrap up of like the best out of those best books of the month. But I didn't want to do that this year because, you know, you can have some months where like you just don't read as well, like you don't have as many of the good books, and you'll have some months where you have loads of them. I loved doing it this way, where I've had all this time to think about it. Like, it's something that I've been thinking about since the beginning of November, about what books would be on this list. I feel really lucky with my reading this year, especially because I feel like I've found the things that I really enjoy, and that's something that is important. Like, reading some books that you don't enjoy as much is not a bad thing, because it shows you what you don't enjoy, which means that you can find more books of what you do enjoy. This was a tangent that you probably didn't need, but I just personally, I think it's been great, and this year really has been the year of finding those books and discovering those things that I genuinely love. That's where it is. So thank you so much for watching. I don't even know what emoji we should do today, actually. There's been so many good books. Let's do the party emoji. You know, the one where it's got like the little party popper thing. Party emoji, something to do with a party. Pop that in the comments below if you've made it this far. Please let me know what your top books of the year were. I would love to get some more recommendations. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. So if you have enjoyed this video, please do give it that thumbs up, subscribe and comment to let me know that you're here. Those 3 things are so important to help this channel. My social media links will be linked below, and I will of course catch you in the next one.